Welcome to All Things Chiropractic.
Welcome to All Things Chiropractic. I'm Paul Andrews.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Mark Davini.
So this is kind of a special because we're doing a 3-part series.
It's a trilogy.
Ooh. And I had, I'm going to break out the Latin for everybody.
Ooh.
Right? Omne trium perfectum.
Ooh.
Everything that comes in threes is perfect.
Perfect.
You know, they say that in music, right? Things are in threes. I remember a friend of mine was doing music theory, and he talked about everything in threes.
Everything in threes, right?
I am not a musically inclined person, so
There
if you object to that, do not send in emails because I have no idea what I'm talking about.
There you are spewing Latin, and all I could think of was snap, crackle, and pop.
Well, it's 3, so it must be perfect. So what are we talking about, Doc?
Actually, it's going to be what I think are the 3 most important topics in chiropractic.
Reimbursement, patient copays.
No.
What are we talking about?
Science, art, and philosophy.
Yes. The Holy Trinity in chiropractic.
The triumvirate of chiropractic.
Well, it's because I heard that early on, because I didn't know what chiropractic was, and I started as a CA, those many years ago. And I remember the doctor saying that it's an art, a science, and a philosophy.
And the differences come about based on the differences in chiropractic comes about from what percentage of each they ascribe to. And that's interesting when you talk to chiropractors that there's different focus points that they make in their practice. One might be more philosophical. One might be more scientific. One might be more of technique-oriented or art. So for the most part, it's one of the reasons why we're so different is because, first of all healthcare is a science, art, and a philosophy. But in chiropractic, it's particularly true, and it's particularly true that we all have different perceptions of what is the priority of those 3.
So with the 3, we thought laying the foundation, talking about the science of chiropractic first would make sense, which I agree. I think we made the right decision. Hopefully you agree.
Absolutely, yes.
So when I look at the science of chiropractic, there are 3 things that as a layperson but someone who has some knowledge in chiropractic over the years. So you can't ignore the anatomy and physiology, right? Because that's where sort of the foundation starts, right? Because you're working on somebody's anatomy and physiology.
These are known things.
And then biomechanics, right? I mean, that to me makes sense because that's what chiropractors do and look at: posture, forces, movement, and then neuroscience, right? Because you're affecting the neurology, I would imagine.
It's what we do.
Right? So
neuromusculoskeletal.
To me, those are the 3, and you tell me, doctor, if I'm wrong, but those are the 3 things I would highlight as the science portion.
Right. It's the foundation. It's the known elements of science. So we progress into this different thinking as time goes on. Way back, it might have been less science and more art and philosophy, where today there's a lot of science that backs up what we do and why we do it. Science is essentially organized knowledge, according to Immanuel Kant.
No. Well, here we go with the quotes already.
There we go. Yeah.
So when I think of the science of chiropractic, I fall back on evidence and research, right? And so because one of the things that's really annoying to me when I'm in the reimbursement realm is that there are codes. Now, I wouldn't say they're chiropractic more than they're supportive procedures that chiropractors use, but you get back these denials from some of these carriers saying, well, this is experimental.
Right.
Right. And then they won't pay for it.
I don't think there's any term out there more misused than evidence-based practice. First of all, practice is the application of knowledge. So we said that we know about anatomy and physiology, so the practice is the application of that. And it requires skill, it requires the knowledge itself, of course, judgment, all directed toward patient care. So that's practice. So now the next question comes out to be is, what's evidence? So if we were on an evidence-based practice, what does that actually mean? So there's tiers of evidence. It's not, everything isn't a double-blind, randomized, controlled study. So there's all these different tiers. And I think what's happening is people have taken the term evidence-based practice and made it into something that it actually isn't. It can be basically, anything from your observation and your particular experience all the way up to systematic reviews of all the relevant randomized controlled studies or trials in that particular subject. The difference might be defending what you might call evidence. Your evidence might be, I've had 30 years experience in chiropractic. I do this. I get this results. You never write it up. You never keep your statistics. You just have this empirical type of approach to your care. It's observational mostly, but it's not a randomized controlled clinical study. But yet we've evolved into this place where they think that really is what we're talking about when we're talking about evidence-based practice, that it has to be this randomized controlled study. Well, first of all, most of them only observe something very specific. Usually in an environment that we're not exposed to in our practices. So you just have to be careful using that term.
I don't disagree. And to me, there's a financial reason why evidence-based gets used. But first of all, let's back up a little bit and let's just say this. Like, the science part of chiropractic, to me, shows up in the everyday practice, as you were saying, with the type of exams you choose to do. Where did those come from? The Fabry Patrick's or the Lasakes, or I'll just use other terms I've heard but don't know what I'm talking about, right? Like, those came from something, right? Those exams have to be based in some kind of a reality that leads a doctor to a conclusion, right?
Correct. I mean, those are orthopedic tests, of course, and they were designed and usually named after the person who developed it. And they're designed to isolate out a particular condition or symptom so that you can try and be more specific about what it is that particular test is testing for example. In chiropractic, we have tests that we use, maybe not as studied in a sense, but a lot of us remember, and still hopefully do remember, techniques that are out there like Gonstead and Thompson and Pierce-Stillwagon and Logan and Activator and all of these techniques that have set protocols, defined ways of doing things. And somewhere along the line, somebody misapplied the term evidence-based and are now making them sound like they're experimental themselves, when most of these techniques have been around for as long as chiropractic. Clay Thompson was, BJ's best buddy kind of thing. So what I'm saying here is that we do have evidence-based practice in chiropractic, and we always have had it. We've done things a certain way for a specific reason, like doing foraminal compression. I do that with and I take the response to that and I do something with it. Well, no different than a Thompson leg check. I observe it, I do something with it.
So to me, here becomes the problem. The research, to me, when I look at, because I looked at, what kind of research is out there in chiropractic? Predominantly, it's going to be symptom-based research, back pain, neck pain, headache. Right? But we all know that are in the profession, either directly or collaterally, know that chiropractors can certainly help with more than that. Our state laws, depending on what state you practice in, might limit your ability to claim that, but we know that there are these effects, whether you want to consider them primary or residual effects of treatment that help. But to get research into a particular profession, you need money and you need the want. So I said, well, what's out there that actually does research? So I looked up a few. There's the World Federation of Chiropractic. That's a global NGO partner, and they supposedly support chiropractic research and policy worldwide. Sometimes that's a double-edged sword because sometimes the policies that come out of these places you might not necessarily agree with, or you might, and I'm not saying WFC has this directly, but I'm saying we know that policy can be formed by politics and dollars, right? More than the actual research. There's the World Health Organization. We talk a lot about them in the ICD-10 classes, and we have our opinions. Chiropractic Pediatric Association came up. ICPA came up as something that has research and education. And then there's these foundations that may not directly, let's say, fund research, but it's more about public relations, like the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, right? They were born out of a want and a need to position chiropractic in a positive light. This was especially during the hot times when, there was all these billboards and these claims that chiropractors caused VADs and strokes and all this stuff, right?
Right.
So that's where that was born. And then NCMEC, one of the largest malpractice carriers out there, has a foundation. Yeah. And there's others, even Palmer, the school has a big one. But I look at all these and I say, well,
Dr. Heidi, Havoc.
Who's funding this stuff? Like, the problem is when you say, well, if I'm a carrier, I'm not going to pay for it unless the evidence shows that it's effective and it's clear cut. But then there's no money to fund these kinds of studies.
Oh, and just because it hasn't been studied doesn't mean it doesn't have value. And that's the quagmire we're stuck in right now, is that we're stuck with the whole concept that unless it's studied, we shouldn't be doing it. And again, that's where this evidence-based practice is trying to take us, in that we only do those things that have been studied. Well, if that's the case, then you better really know all the studies that are out there, and you better be willing to accept everything that's been done properly and according to proper, say, research protocol. But for the most part, just because it hasn't been studied doesn't mean that it isn't effective or it shouldn't be done. And that's where we are right now. So everybody runs behind evidence-based practice, and if it's not out there in a double-blind study or whatever, blah, 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 then you can't do it, and we're not going to cover it, and you're going to get in trouble for doing it. And they're ignoring the fact that chiropractic's been around since 1895. B.J. Palmer was probably one of the biggest researchers out there in chiropractic. There's tons of stuff out there that if we really just spent the time putting it all together, we probably have more than enough to prove what we do. Not to say that an insurance company would accept it.
So, speaking of the ton of stuff that's out there, I've got a few questions. The first one is, with all the stuff that's been out there, and, as a profession, chiropractic still is pretty young, I think, overall. Are there any scientifically researched aspects of chiropractic that have been debunked or show that they're not effective?
Well, I mean, the problem is, and the answer to that is yes, in some ways. They do reliability studies, they do doctor studies, interoperability studies, things like that, where they try and say, okay, what's the reliability of this procedure? We put 20 doctors in a room, they each do that procedure on a patient, and what did they come up with? And what's kind of interesting is that one of the most highly reliable procedures that has a high interoperability percentage is light check.
Leg check,
Something
right.
as simple as leg check has had more backing as far as at least being repeatable from one doctor to the next, as opposed to more subjective procedures where they found that the interdoctor reliability was low. Something like kinesiology, where when we talk about art, there's definitely a skill to that. And some people are really good at it. Some people
Yeah.
not so good at it.
I know.
So-
I'm trying to resist going into the art and philosophy in this conversation because we're supposed to stick with the science, but they do cross over. So now on the opposite sort of side of that question, has there been any newer revelations in chiropractic research that you're aware of? Anything that's sort of like emerging?
Well, they definitely have done tons of studies that prove that we can help relieve pain. Okay, and that's helpful, but it also hurts us in the sense that they tie us to pain as the reason why we should be doing what we're doing. And those of us that are chiropractors know that there is so much more to chiropractic than just pain relief. In fact, I used to tell my patients, if your goal is to just get pain, to relieve your pain, please go and buy a bottle of aspirin. It's a lot cheaper and easier than coming to see me. But the real goal here is to obviously relieve the symptoms, but correct the condition as much as possible and maintain it under a wellness model. So pain has been our best and worst enemy when it comes to research. They've done the studies, like I mentioned Dr. Heidi, doing a lot of studies on the neuroplasticity of adjustments and how it affects the brain. I mean, it's amazing what it is that we can do to affect the brain. Dr. Ted Kerrick. I mean, they've done all this research that proves that adjustments go far beyond pain relief and that we affect the body's as a whole, and that we help make it a better functioning organ system. So, yeah, I mean, chiropractic has all this. And the problem is that some chiropractors fight it themselves. They don't ascribe to any of it themselves as chiropractors. So we do have a double-edged sword with it.
Do you think that because there's, I would say, more research on the pain aspect of chiropractic in relief of pain, do you think that the research has painted chiropractic as a profession in a corner?
We've become pain management doctors, and unfortunately, we keep trying to reinforce that. Again, don't get me wrong, pain is important to relieve on patients. It's the number one reason why they come see you. But if we stop at pain relief, we're doing them a disservice. We should be making them understand the full ramifications of chiropractic and what that means in their life. So, yes, we're being painted into a corner and identified as pain doctors, which means that who gets to control us? The medical profession. We're another one of their modalities.
I'd say the carriers even more, because
the carriers, yeah.
If you're trying to make ends meet, right, and the carriers really push you into a corner because this is what they'll reimburse. Their medical policy says this, their reimbursement and coding policy says that. And you're trying to keep the doors open.
Right. But this comes down to embrace who and what you are and what it is that you can do for people and what it is that a carrier will and wants to pay for. So that means that you have a patient come in, you use their insurances for what they offer, but you make people understand the value of chiropractic as an ongoing service in their life that they might have to pay for. I don't have insurance for my haircuts, but yet I am willing to go.
That's a business.
That's a business, right? But I'm willing to go and pay and get a haircut every month. So there are certain things people have recognized that they have to pay for. And chiropractic as a profession is failing in making people understand the value of chiropractic now more than ever, because pain is being reimbursed, pain relief is being reimbursed, and few people are taking on the challenge of making people understand chiropractic as a healthcare wellness model that they need for the rest of their life.
But let me pivot this pain discussion a little bit in a light that really helps chiropractors. And there's been a lot of states that have embraced alternatives to opioid and prescription drugs. And we know that chiropractic can help with pain management. Frankly, to me, these prescribers should be directing these patients to pain management that's not pharmaceutically based, like chiropractors, PT, massage. And I think where some of this falls short is because the carriers are resistant to good coverage,
They don't want to pay for anything. And, but like I say,
But they'll pay for drugs.
But they'll pay for drugs,
That's a whole nother podcast.
Right. But I do agree, yes, use every angle you can to get a patient into your office in a sense. If it's pain relief, it's pain relief. It's to help to keep you off opioids, keep you off opioids. But what I'm saying is don't end it there. You have to accept the challenge of making patients understand that chiropractic is more. And it also make them understand that insurances will only want to pay for the pain relief phase of that care.
I know I'm talking to a chiropractor because you're starting to get on that philosophy soapbox. And I'm saying to you, for someone who has had an addiction problem, pain relief with chiropractic is everything.
Right. No,
for
so
them.
You get them out of pain, and in the process, make them educate them so they understand why they have to continue with chiropractic. Don't drop the ball at the most important part of it. Yes, insurances may actually do us a favor someday, or maybe state laws and regulations that they allow people to come to us to have their pain taken away and help avoid getting addicted to drugs. Great. But don't end it there is all I'm saying. Use that and run with that.
The day a carrier, I only know one out there actually, I know one carrier, but the day that carriers in general pay for asymptomatic chiropractic care, we know we've made it. Right?
Right, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. Don't wait for it. We're not going to live long enough, but don't wait for it. Just embrace the model of, in a sense, letting them bring them to you, but then you have to teach them how to drink.
Because it brings me to when we teach our Medicare class, and then we read the definition of maintenance in the Medicare NCD, right?
Right.
And how preposterous it is to someone who is a Medicare eligible patient who says, wait a minute, Medicare is not going to pay for keeping me out of pain, for keeping my function optimal. I have to backslide before it'll get picked up.
Yeah, catch and release, catch and release. So if we're going to go back to science in a sense, we say, look, science has given us everything we need. It's given us the fact that we can relieve pain. It's given us the fact that we not only relieve pain, but we can actually help them be better physiologically. So let one be one, let the other be the other. Use science to gain confidence, to understand and advocate that chiropractic is something better. The biggest problem we're having right now, honestly, is chiropractors. Here's a question. I pose it to chiropractors out there. You practice a technique, meaning people come in, they get adjusted. What's the basis for using that technique in your office?
Well, now you're talking about the art, right?
Well, I mean, scientifically and clinically, I want to say, what is your rationale for doing it the way you do it? If you can't express that intelligently.
Because my body can't take the other way anymore.
Right. Well, but I do it this way, I adjust this way, I use this technique or whatever, but there has to be a rationale for it. The problem is we have too many chiropractors that do too many different things that can't explain why they do it, except they'll just say, well, that's what I found to work. Well, great, but there should be some kind of structured protocol in your office so that when we're finally tasked with explaining who and what we are and what we do, there's some level of continuity from one doctor to the next, which is what we lack right now. It's a big, big problem. They always say the fewer the facts, the stronger the opinion. How's that, right?
Well, it's funny because if I go back to sort of the beginning here, and I agree with you, every single office, every chiropractic office is a micro research lab in a sense. Right? Because the longer you've been in practice, the more data you have, whether it's in your head or it's written down. If we could just harness that research in an easy way, the problem is no easy way.
Right.
And it'll be a highly critiqued way probably too because of the controls. But to me, you can't discount the historical data from a well-seasoned chiropractic office.
No,
right?
no.
Would
we
you?
are our own research pool.
Yeah. Now, I have a thought about this, but as an assessment tool, what do you think is the most underutilized assessment tool that a chiropractor neglects to use?
Tool?
I have a thought on this.
Go ahead. Let me
It
hear your
relates to
thought.
Medicare, and then what do you think the tool is that I'm talking about? The outcome assessment tools.
Oh,
The
yes.
functional outcome assessment tools. To me, that is establishing a baseline of need, right? Because
functional need.
Because
Yeah.
function doesn't necessarily mean pain. A lot of times function gets impaired by pain, but not always,
Right.
right? So it's a tool, and there's tons of them out there. I mean, choose the one you like, but to me, that turns some of the theoretical into actual data.
This is taking the practical and moving it into the realm of science, which is what we all have to do if we want to be in a better place. And I'm not even talking insurance companies anymore. I'm talking about all the work necessary to educate the average person about the value of chiropractic. It should be common knowledge by now, but it isn't. There's so much out there that's common knowledge and so much out there that's just generally accepted, but yet we're not one of those things. It's time for us to educate our patients enough to become common knowledge. And then once it becomes common knowledge, then like you say, we take all this information and maybe somebody will form studies and do studies now that we're able to have the information that they need. Because the problem is there are just as many techniques out there as there are chiropractors. So some use outcome assessment tools, some don't. Some use them this way, but they don't use them all the time. They only use them for Medicare patients, blah, blah, blah. There needs to be some standardization of protocol in our practices so that if somebody's willing to do a study, they have a pool of people of practitioners they can go to for the information. Right now, they got nothing.
Well, when I'm looking at the science of chiropractic, I think you have to look beyond data sets, and you have to look beyond graphs, and you have to look beyond, because we don't have the deep pockets, right? We don't have organizations that are going to, because it takes a lot of money and time, right?
Right. And I think insurance companies follow a quote that I found from Plato. Science is perception. And they live by that. Their perception of what we are and what we do is not what we perceive our value to be. Time to change the perception. And that comes from things like getting our act together, being consistent, being able to report properly. We won't get into the whole ICD-10 thing, but the reason why they went from 14,000 codes to almost 80,000 now is because they want to know specifically what it is you're treating and what it took to successfully treat that particular condition. And if we don't win that statistical battle, we're going to keep losing and losing to the point where we just can't exist anymore. So time to get our act together and recognize that we need to have some level of consistency in our profession. That's something that we all do. We know that if I'm going to go get an appendectomy, I am going to more than likely get an incision on the lower right abdomen. That's just a known thing. But if you go to a chiropractor, way too often, you don't even know if you're going to get an adjustment anymore. So we need to start some level of standardization. Starts with the schools, getting together and agreeing on a protocol that's at least general enough to fit everybody's philosophy, which we'll talk about later, and art, which we'll talk about later.
Well, to me, too, there's also this looking beyond the original intent, meaning if we lean into the pain management part of it, but like GLP-1s, right? Everyone thinks that they were developed for weight loss, but that was a that was a byproduct of GLP-1s. That wasn't the original development and intent.
But science is perception now, right?
Yeah, but that's my point, right? So if we look at the research even that's out there and say, well, what if anything was a byproduct of reducing this pain, and does it show chiropractic actually is more than just pain relief? Right?
Right.
Looking beyond and looking off label, I guess, or looking for the positive side effects.
So, leaving you with a concept of chiropractic in science. Well, number one, what we do is very scientific. Number two, what we do is generally, the full effects of what we do is generally unknown, and all too often, even to chiropractors. So it's time to recognize what we are, what we can do to its full extent, and then letting people know that so that times can move in the right direction instead of just painting us into that corner you mentioned.
As Albert Einstein said, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know.
There we go.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.
Yeah, join us next time. We will be doing chiropractic, the art.
I can't wait. That'll be fun. I like that.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you all.
I'm Paul Andrews.
Thanks for listening to All Things Chiropractic. We'd love to hear from you. Visit allthingschiropractic.com with comments, episode ideas, or questions. Or connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at All Things Chiropractic Podcast. Be sure to join Dr. Mark Davini and Paul Andrews next time for another episode of All Things Chiropractic.